Well, appreciate you coming down. This is really going to be a hot year, I think. We're just about to the new year now, and it's going to be a hot year for electric cars. And you just happen to include Nissan and the Leaf and others too. And we wanted to get a handle on what's going to happen with electric cars this coming year, especially in view of the rush on the Leaf in January. So tell us, what cars are you marketing, or will you be marketing, that are fully electric?
Full electric is right now, at least as far as what's solid, as far as what we know for sure, is just the Leaf.
Okay.
But Volkswagen, Hyundai, as well as Honda, the other manufacturers that we represent, all have electric cars on their product plans. We just at this point know very little about them.
So that they could be coming in during 2011 also.
No, I don't think we'll be seeing anything that soon. Because if it was, we probably would have known more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my sense of it is that, this has legs. This has, excuse the expression, it has wheels. and when one manufacturer, a couple of them, started up, then the others have to follow, or they're going to get left. They're worried about getting left out. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I think they're just like any other competitive field, they're always watching what the other guys are doing, and I'm sure they're very, very curiously watching how Nissan tackles all the potential issues of having a mass-produced electric car.
Yeah, well, we're on. I mean, what do you think about this? I just say it as a proposition without advancing or advocating for it. But if the electric car is successful, and it might well be, because there's a lot of people who want it to be successful, and a lot of people who are waiting to participate in a great big peer group thing about, if it is successful, it's going to change cars everywhere in the world soon, quickly.
But with that said, I mean, to put it into perspective, I think it's been 10 years or so since the Prius first came out, and there are several other hybrid cars in the market.
That's true.
And at this point, as much hype there are, I don't think the market share of those cars are even 10%. So
true,
so we have to kind of temper our expectations, and
Yeah.
I think with the technology like this, with the range issues and the weight issues, and some limitations in its applications, I think it will be something everyone knows about. But the actual share, I think, will be I think we'll still have cars with internal combustion engines for a while.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because you got to be close to it, and that is the American love affair with the car, the Hawaii love affair with the car. I mean, people are so emotionally attached to their cars, and it's not just recently; it's for the whole history of the car as a cultural item. And part of that is the piston engine, fossil fuel car. That's what it is. So if you look at the Leaf, nothing against the design or anything, it's pretty vanilla. And it's not something you could love with all your heart and get sexually involved with.
Yeah, but look at the iPhone, right? It's just a square little thing, and people sleep with those things.
True. You must know about me.
So I think the generation's a little different, though, because you're looking at a people who grew up with, computers, laptops, cell phones, video games.
Yeah.
So and I think we were joking about it earlier. I mean, this is just another step in that, as far as being okay. Now this is just a bigger gadget, so it might be a slightly different kind of love affair. Yeah, you don't get your hands on maybe greasy and oily and things like that. But I think there is an appeal to a car with a lot of electronics and buttons and Bluetooth and navigation systems and all that kind of stuff.
You know, I'm thinking a couple of thoughts come to mind. One, you know, I went to PCAT, you know, PCAT on Cook Street. It's the, what is it, hydrogen and also electric car facility. It's part of the High Tech Development Corporation. And we walk in the shop there, and it's so clean. The concrete, you can have lunch on the concrete. It's amazing. I said, why is this so clean? What, do you guys clean it every day? He says, no, no. When you have an electric car or a hydrogen car, it's just no grease, there's no oil. Things are clean. It's the way it is.
Yeah.
So this is going to change your whole maintenance routine, isn't it? You're going to have two separate shops?
No, it's one shop, but then there's certain areas that will handle electric cars. You know, we'll have we're required to have a charging dock in the shop, as well as several places throughout the dealership facility. And there's some special tools and stuff you got to wear.
Insulation,
yeah. So there is it'll be part of the shop, but it'll still be mixed in with the other vehicles.
And what about all those guys that, you know, spent big bucks and took a lot of time to train themselves on conventional cars, went to the mainland, wherever, you know, you go to get a good education on the modern technology in cars. So is that lost?
Well, no, like I said, still the vast majority of the cars are still your traditional, you know, gasoline-powered vehicles. So we did have to send a couple of guys to the mainland to be EV certified, so they'll have the basic knowledge of the EV vehicles. But to the extent that there are other types of cars, you know, still around, I mean, they'll be servicing both. But when a Leaf customer does come into service, they will be only serviced by one of those guys.
Leaf qualified mechanics.
Yeah. But you know, because with that said, I mean, you got, I think, 300 reservations. You know, we'll get, you know, maybe a quarter, maybe a third of those people. So you know, so you're only talking about, you know, what is that? 10% is 30.
Doesn't sound
60,
like a high profit item.
80 cars. You know, those cars come in for maintenance once a year. So I mean, if the guy only did the electric cars, I mean, there won't be enough things to do, at least initially.
Yeah. And you don't, I mean, if it all works out swell, you would not expect as much maintenance with an electric car because there's not that many moving parts.
Yeah,
and
I
so
mean, we
forth.
look at the maintenance schedule. I mean, we're talking about that as for an investor in a dealership. You know, it is kind of a problem, but good for the consumer. But basically, the maintenance schedule is once a year or 15,000 miles, and basically we just check the electricals of the car, make sure everything is working, check the battery, rotate the tires, maybe change the wiper blades, and that's it. There's no fluids in the car. I mean, there's stuff like air conditioners and things like that, but you know, there's no oil in the car, there's no radiator, there's no there's no filters to change.
All of those things can break, and so they wouldn't be there to break. Yeah.
So there's not nearly the number of moving parts in one of these vehicles. It's all electronic.
So let me take you on a trip into the future, the ghost of Christmas future. Okay. So let's assume that the 300 reservations on the Leaf turn into 3,000 or 30,000. How many cars are there in the state? It must be like 500,000 cars or something.
No, I actually think the number of cars that are around is almost if not more than one to one as far as residents. Yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah. Of course, they're not all on the road every day. I mean, there's probably some cars that aren't driven hardly.
I know a lot of people have two cars. And they can't drive both at the same time. But they do have two cars. And families that say two people with four cars, incredible.
And also, too, looking at it into perspective, too, like, you know, as bad as the last couple of years have been for new car sales, in the statewide, there was still, I think last year, 08 was probably, 09 was probably the worst year in maybe the last 30 years, and this year probably
because of the recession.
Second worst. But you're still talking about the 35,000 new car registrations, not including rental fleets. You know, so 300 out of 35,000. I mean, still a
peanuts.
Tiny fraction.
Yeah, but let me take you to Christmas future here, a good Christmas future, maybe. So okay, everybody decides to get green, and green is more than just a car. Green is a state of mind. Green is the state of your roof with the PV, It's the state of any choices you make on energy efficiency and this and that and the other. And not only at home, but in the office. And so people go green, okay? And part of that is a Leaf or some other, electric vehicle. And let's assume that it goes from 300 to 3,000 to 30,000, and that most of the cars now are being sold in electric cars. And all of a sudden, you find that it's not a small fraction of your output, but it's most of your output. The same thing with the other dealerships. And there's charging stations everywhere. We're going to talk about that later. And things are different because these cars are different. They're different in the sale. They're different in the maintenance. They're different, in terms of useful life. They're probably different in terms of the way they're financed too, which I want to talk about with you. So in that case, the dealership, as we know it today, your company, as we know it today, is going to go through a transition. What is it going to look like, say, if this happens? How is it going to be different?
Well, I guess it just depends on how far into the future, because I think this will happen, slowly, kind of like the growth of the hybrid cars. I think by 2020, which isn't that far away, but I think the most optimistic of projections, and the optimistic projection being Nissan, probably the biggest players at this point on a volume scale, or at least they see it as it's like 10% market share. So it's not insignificant, but it is, that means 90% are still running on gas of some kind, whether they're gas only or hybrids or whatever. It would certainly be different, because I think what like we're talking about, there is way less maintenance on the vehicles, and I'm also very curious how what kind of values these vehicles will have on the resale market, because the primary value on the vehicles are batteries, and although the batteries will have like an 8-year warranty on them, the replacement cost of these batteries will probably be quite high. Because even on a smaller battery, on a hybrid like on a Civic, which has a relatively small battery compared to like this Leaf, with parts and labor, still like $4,000 or so to change the battery. So a bigger battery, I don't expect there to be more labor, but I mean, as far as the unit cost of the part itself, it's probably going to be quite a bit. Yeah. And as a dealer, I don't really know the whole cycle on what happens to the batteries that are disposed of.
Have you on the question of batteries, Better Place and all that. They got this thing about the battery switch. Now, I don't know if the battery, I kind of doubt. And Nissan was involved. Nissan Renault were working together on that. Yeah. And I doubt the battery that would be in the Leaf is the same battery that would be in the Nissan Renault car that Better Place was considering or is considering. But they had this thing where you drive in. And then there's a hoist. In fact, it was tested in Japan. Yeah. Only maybe 6 or 8 months.
I've seen videos of it, and I've spoken to Brian Goldstein before.
Yeah.
And it's pretty neat. But again, it's kind of because it's a big infrastructure issue. But the way, assuming that there's enough vehicles for those to make one of those facilities economically viable, the subscription-based service for these batteries, where you pay for a subscription for the batteries, kind of like you buy cell phone minutes, it's kind of interesting. It's just a matter of not really sure if there will be enough manufacturers that would agree to
standardize
a single standard. I think it's a long ways, I think, before that can happen, because I don't think there's going to be enough of a consortium of manufacturers that agree on exactly what would be the best standard. So because this thing is emerging. It's kind of like asking the cell phone companies to all use the same battery.
Right. People have trouble agreeing. I mean, they agreed on the standard for the charging station, though, right? There's some kind of standard on
I believe so. Or if not, it's just, I guess, maybe some adapters to change how the plugs are or something. But as far as so there's some degree of standardization.
So they were talking. This is maybe 2 years ago, maybe more even. Better Place was talking about how you drive in
Right.
And this hoist comes and it
Right.
just pulls your battery right out
Right.
and puts another one right back in, and now you're
Right.
fully charged. You don't have to wait 26 minutes
It's
or
like 10 minutes or something, right?
yeah, as long as it takes to hoist
Right,
it
right.
and all that. And you say that's a great idea, but somebody's got to carry an inventory of $4,000 batteries.
Right.
This is not cheap.
Yeah.
And the standardization problem. But I mean, it may be an interesting solution going forward because charging takes a while, and every time you want to speed up the charging, you got to raise the wattage, and it gets more dangerous and so forth. Yeah. So what I was thinking though is that in a world of this new generation that you describe, people who've grown up with computers and gadgets and all that, and the car becomes a gadget, it strikes me that they're not going to come into the dealership with the same kind of mentality that the people who are affected emotionally by cars. It doesn't matter to them whether it's blue or green or gray. It doesn't matter. And the seats and all that, I mean, maybe this will change over time and people will come back to those kinds of things. But I imagine, let's assume for this discussion that at least in the first iteration of this, that they don't care. If it's gray and everyone looks like, it was built in a communist country, it's okay with them because it's a gadget and they want efficiency, they want, good operation quality and all that. So if that's the case, don't you think that they're going to be looking to buy it off the web for a stated price, no negotiation, no ifs, ands, or buts? You buy it, you put your credit card down, now you have the car.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nissan is essentially kind of doing that, where right now you can't go to the dealership and reserve a car. So right now everything is on the web. So even when someone calls us and they go, okay, I want the Leaf, they go, well, you got to go to the website, NissanLeaf.com, whatever it is. You go to the Nissan website, you go to the Leaf link, and you register on the site. And then you spec and reserve your car.
And you know the price, the tax credits. There's not a lot of extra choices to make.
No, I mean, I guess a lot of it, I kind of go back to this iPhone thing again. iPhone comes in, kind of all look the same, but people put different kind of covers on it.
Because
there is certain amount of personalization that they do.
Right.
So Leaf, same thing. I mean, it only comes in one color interior, but there is 5 or 6 different exterior colors, and you can put some stickers on the car. This is EV, and you can there's a various things that you can do to customize a car to a certain degree.
Yeah. Well, do you think that'll happen again, or do you think the generation, whatever, I don't know what you want to call it, the iPhone generation, the generation will not be too concerned about spending money on those extra things? Because it seems to me that if you have those extra things, those emotional things, those personal taste things, there is a lot the dealership can do to satisfy that demand. If people are not interested and they buy it off the web for a fixed price, and they just want to drive it, it's just transportation for them, then it's not so much the dealership can do relative to what the dealership has been doing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but there are a segment of the consumer that are like that already. We always make fun of people who drive Toyotas, because we don't sell Toyotas. But but you look at people who drive the hopefully no one from Cervical's watching this, but but like stereotypically, people who buy a Corolla or a Camry, I mean, they're just buying transportation. They're just buying transportation. You see all these old, I'm Japanese, I can make fun of my own race, right? Old Japanese people, right? They drive your white Corolla or the white Camry, and when that car gets old, they just trade it for the newer version of the same car. So I mean,
I'm the same way. And I'm not Japanese. I'm the same way.
But you're going to have the segment of that population. But I think, even the driving an electric car, I think it represents a statement about yourself.
Sure it does.
And I think that's one of the big things about the success of like the Prius. Honda has a hybrid, but it was a Civic hybrid. It looks exactly like the other Civics. I think part of the appeal of people buying the hybrid is that not only is it a very good car, but everybody who drives a hybrid, the other people know that, oh, this guy is driving a hybrid. It's a Prius, it's a hybrid. So I think the Leaf, to a certain degree, that's also the statement that you're making to the rest of the world, going, okay, I'm a green guy, I drive an electric car. So I think there is still a lot of emotional attachment or emotional representation you make,
Yeah.
with the car.
Sure. And it goes to, I mean, now that you say that, it's absolutely true, even today. I go to this rally at Mother Waldron Park. What a great name for a park. And there's two Teslas there. And each guy is telling me his Tesla is better than the other guy's Tesla.
Right.
And they're both $100,000 plus,
or like the phone again, you got the iPhone, and how many covers are there, right? And even having an iPhone in general as opposed to a guy who has an Android phone or whatever, it says something about yourself. Even a computer, it's like, oh, I'm a Mac, I'm a PC guy, right? And you got that commercial thing. But, some people buy, because of the merits of one computer versus the other, but a lot of them it's they're not techies, but they might say, oh yeah, I just like the image of the Mac. I'm not the corporate guy. I'm an independent person, so I use the Mac.
We express ourselves through our gadgets.
And I think the electric car kind of is an extension of that. Now like everyone has a Prius. Right, so even Nissan there, I think they're positioning themselves to be okay. When people think of an electric car, they want people to think Nissan or the Leaf. Just like now, even though a lot of other people make hybrids, when you say hybrid, first thing everybody thinks of is a Prius. So I think there is a lot of, image or status or emotional, this is who I am kind of thing, with the car. Even though the car itself, is not. Doesn't have the appeal of a Mustang or a Camaro or anything like that. But I think for this generation, people are gonna look back years later. So I remember back in the year 2011. Remember that Leaf? Only went 100 miles on a charge. It took like all night to charge, and you'd be laughing about it probably 20, 30 years from now, going, remember how primitive that was?
20, 30 years, you charge it once a year.
I remember we used to plug in the cell phone every night. If I talked too much on my iPhone, it would just
That's very. I was looking at Kindle, the Kindle from Amazon, and when it first came out, it wouldn't last. The battery wouldn't last that long. Now the battery in this $139 Kindle, which is a fraction of the old price, lasts for a month. A month, unbelievable. Same thing is going to happen here.
So that's going to happen. I mean, we'll be laughing about the day we have to charge our phone every day or have to carry an extra battery around and stuff like that.
That's over. So I guess the question is, assuming that happens, and we get better electronic storage and efficiency and all that. Don't you think that the Prius and the hybrids are going to go away?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the hybrid is kind of a intermediate technology. I mean, even like the Chevy Bolt, which is a little different from the Prius in the standpoint. It's a hybrid, but the engine acts as a generator that produces juice for the electric
Right.
motor.
So it doesn't actually run the car; it just produces.
Yeah. So it still produces some emissions, but it's a little different from the standpoint that it's not. The Volt still is pretty much only propelled technically by the electric motor.
Yeah.
But I think right now that those technologies have to exist to overcome that range anxiety. Because 100 miles should be sufficient, but I think when people are used to the 250 to 350 mile range, and being able to just gas and go. So even if you don't plan ahead, all you have to do is fill up gas and go. I mean, I think people are going to be a little anxious to all of a sudden not have that in a fully electric vehicle.
Even in Oahu.
Yeah,
where
even on
the
Oahu.
distances are not that far.
Yeah, you get stuck in traffic, or and I don't know ultimately how much. They say 100 miles, but if you're stuck in traffic, you're running your AC full blast, how much of an effect that actually has on the real range? Even though the weather conditions here are ideal for the battery as far as having a very stable temperature, how the passage of time will affect the ability to fully charge the battery, because you do lose some charge as the cars get older.
What do you think about the notion? This is sort of like the trickle thing, but What do you think about the notion, maybe it's already on the marketplace, is that PV cells on top of the car, and the car is always charging, so that, I don't know if you can keep up with the use of the electricity, but at least you can always trickle charge from the roof. It seems to me a natural thing.
Yeah, Nissan actually has a small one on their spoiler. That actually, the car comes in two trim levels, S and a SV and a SL or something like that. So the higher one, the $34,000 one, has a small solar panels by the spoiler, which help charge some of the, I guess the accessories.
Yeah.
Whether they're like the lights or some of the non-core powered items in the car. But like you said, it only kind of helps on the peripherals, so to speak.
Yeah. And I was in France about a year ago, and I was in love with my iPhone, and I walked by a little shop, not even a department store, and I noticed they had a solar charger for the iPhone. I said, wow, only in Europe they could be so creative like this. And I said to myself that you can't find it in the U.S. I never did find it in the U.S. But it's those kinds of creative accessories I think are going to happen, just the way things work in the marketplace. People are going to want them and be willing to pay for them, and then there'll be all those guys out there who are going to come up with stuff like that, with for example, solar trickle chargers or what have you, or different color upholstery, whatever. So it hasn't started yet, but if we take our history, we look back to the history of the car, we're going to find out a whole new industry springing up. Yeah. So I think there probably will be plenty for the dealership to do.
I mean, there'll be some invention that's going to probably be a tipping point of some kind.
Yeah.
Where it kind of goes from the early adopters, and the green crowd, so to speak, to the mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, I think. And it won't be that long, because I think the group of early adopters, the really hardcore green guys, there are not that many of them. I don't think there's that many of them. And I think that when the mainstream population comes in, we're going to see the same kinds of demands made. But I still don't you agree that the role of the dealership will change, assuming this happens?
Yeah, I think it'll change to a degree, but for whatever reason, over the history of automobile retailing, so to speak, the manufacturer has never been able to successfully retail cars on their own.
Yeah.
But like you said, though, that could change, because I think a lot of it was because cars needed to be serviced and maintained. But the other thing also, though, is the infrastructure.
You mean the charging infrastructure?
Well, the charging infrastructure, but also the dealership infrastructure, as far as, because right now there are dealerships around the country, once they sell the car, they don't have to worry about they don't need to foot the expense of having a facility, holding an inventory, training their technicians, and all those things that the dealer pays for. The manufacturer doesn't have to worry about. But if they were to do it on their own, they would have to pay for all that stuff on their own. And so, at least over the history of automotive retail, which is basically the last 100 years.
They're happy to have the dealers.
So there's some cost sharing from that standpoint, where they would focus more on R&D and the production and the distribution of the vehicles to the various parts of the country. But it will change from the standpoint, like you said, that the cars do have less maintenance.
Yeah.
As far as purchasing over the internet, there's a lot of that already on the regular cars. The other thing is also too, a lot of all the states have different laws. Everyone talks about legal paperwork and whatever. There's tons of it, and it does differ by state. And so
dealerships become expert in that.
Yeah,
nobody else wants to. Yeah.
Yeah, as you know, there's a lot of regulatory issues from that as well that
Yeah.
differ from state to state, and also too when there's relationships that you got to maintain, whether it's financing the vehicles, knowing the market, so you kind of know what the value of the car is when it comes back, because it does differ from a region to region, what certain types of cars
Yeah.
are valued
Yeah,
at.
though that's a whole new
you
issue.
know.
But let me ask you about financing. Financing to me, I've noticed, and this is anecdotal, it's only my little world and my friends, but I've noticed more of my friends are leasing cars now. They haven't bought a car in years. But they lease them like they change their underwear. It's amazing how fast they change. And good for them. I'm an old-fashioned guy, I don't do that. But I'm just wondering that when you get into electric cars, maybe the model for financing and leasing versus buying is going to change. Maybe leasing is going to find its measure now, and everybody will be leasing on new kinds of leases.
Well, I think Nissan expects something like 70% of their Leaf buyers at least to lease. I don't know what the stat so far has been on the customers that we dealt with here in Hawaii, but and that does make sense though, because it's like when you have your phone, you probably change your phone when your contract is up after 2 years.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Imagine they can predict that.
Imagine getting a Leaf with all of these gadgets on the car, and how dated they'll be after a couple 3 years.
Right, because the technology is changing so quickly.
Yeah, and then you're probably going to want a new one.
Yeah, sure, I do. Sure, especially if if I get twice as much range on it and all that. I don't want the old stuff.
Right.
Anyway.
And
So
again, new features will come out that whether it's maybe your phone has a newer version of Bluetooth and it doesn't work with your car anymore, or whatever. I mean, things that we can't even make up right now because we don't know what's in the future. But
So you think the dealership will become more actively involved? I mean, I know dealerships are already very actively involved in financing arrangements, although so are the manufacturers with their capital concentrations. But you think the dealership would be more actively involved in this kind of arrangement where, in fact, a larger number of people will rent and or lease, and the dealership will have those leases? Is that in the cards?
I think more and more people will lease, because I think people like to change cars, and if you're only gonna, even on a regular car, if you're only gonna keep your car 2, 3, maybe 4 years, it does make more to lease, because people go, oh, but I don't own my car. But if you take out a loan to buy a car, you don't own the car until you make the last payment anyway. And when you lease, basically you're only paying what we tell them is you're only paying for the portion of the car you use. There's a option to purchase value at the end, but you're not paying for the entire car.
Right.
And then trying to divide that into monthly payments.
Right.
You're basically just using the portion of the car and monthly payments. And for a place like Hawaii, you got the excise tax. Well, if you lease the car, you're only paying excise tax on your monthly payments, whereas when you buy the car, you pay for the entire car, you pay a tax on the entire car, and then you finance that. Even if you only own the car for 3 years, if you finance for 6, you still got to pay tax on the entire car. So I mean, so if you don't keep the car that long, whether it's the electric car or not, I mean, it does make sense to lease.
Yeah, well, I would definitely, it's like you get a problem about the aftermarket. Right now, at least as long as I've been around with cars anyway, conventional car, when you buy a new car, you either try to sell your old one in the newspaper, or or on Craigslist.
Right.
Okay. Or I come back and I try to trade it in with you and so forth, and I can look in the Blue Book and I can get some idea of the range of value I should get for it. And it's a little ritual that you go through.
Right.
I think that's going to change, don't you, when you have electric cars, especially in this first generation, because they're largely vanilla. because the technology is moving very quickly. It makes them older sooner, and it'll be hard to get the same kind of value out of it. And exactly who wants a 100-mile range car when the new ones are 300-mile range
Plus,
cars?
too, the 100-mile range car might only be 85 by the time it's 5 years old.
Right. Well, the battery's just very nearly dead.
Yeah.
You know.
So again, leasing for that makes sense too, because like you buy a Toyota or Honda or whatever, you can kind of guess what the resale value might be because you got some history. But an electric car, it's lease the car and let Nissan guess what the future value of the car is.
Right. Whatever they want to pay me, I'll just take it, and that'd be the end of it.
Yeah, because you don't know what the value is going to be. Especially when there is a battery replacement looming.
That's the big thing.
And I think there's some assumption that as there's more volume, economy of scales will bring the price down. But it's speculation at this point.
Well, and speculation too as to whether the problem of range would be solved by a better battery. In other words, if it's only a matter of the battery, then I'll spend the $4,000 and keep the car for another 3 or 4 years, because now I'll have the best technology. I'll have a greater range. If it's a matter of changing a lot of other components that are deep in the car, buying a new battery may not be the solution.
So.
It reminds me of a computer, so I have a computer.
Right.
Now my computer is it's old, its chip is old, its storage is too small, it doesn't have the latest wireless, technology. So now what do I do with it? Well, I'll tell you what I do with it, Stan. In the trash.
Yeah. Or you give it to one of your associates, right?
Right. Our associates would know better. That's why they're our associates. Anyway, so I really feel that we're on the threshold of a lot of changes. It's really fun to talk to you about this. But I want to talk about the charging stations, because I personally think that has a lot to do with the success of this new initiative. So right now, I think I heard today that there was, in terms of the charging stations out there on the street, one, which is actually one better than a couple months ago when there were none. How are we going to get charging stations, disseminated, proliferated around the community so I can feel, that I have a safety net when I drive my electric car down the street?
Well, I think just like the cars themselves, initially just to establish the infrastructure, there's probably going to have to be some governmental subsidies, just like any new field that the government thinks in the best interest of the people to get it to the next level until there's enough interest in the private sector.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of whether those charging stations are identified as good good investment for the taxpayers.
Yeah, maybe it goes to the same thing about the new ideas about financing and leasing and all that for this new generation of cars, and new sort of configurations in the marketplace. But maybe charging stations. If somebody said, for example, Fidell, for $20,000, we'll build a little charging station for you, and we get a lease, put it in a prominent place, and you get $50 anytime anybody charges, because it has a very 480 volt, or watt charger.
Quick charger,
And in no time at all they'll be lined up, and you'll make money at $50 a pop. And I said, okay, that sounds like a really good investment. And I go in with 27 of my friends, and now we own a charging station. Don't you think that would happen? I think that would happen.
Yeah, I think so. It just kind of needs that initial surge to get it going. But at least to a certain degree, the federal government, but as well as here, I think there is a commitment to clean energy with the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative.
Yeah, sure.
To be 70% energy independent by 2030, something like that, which
yeah.
isn't that far away.
No. But it is doable,
So.
although some people don't think so. I think it's doable, and part of it is this. So I guess the question is, what role do you see the government playing in trying to incentivize this, or putting it more brutally, I mean, forcing this to happen so that this market can actually get legs? What does the government have to do? There's Neil Abercrombie. He's right over there on the other side of the lens. What would you tell him?
Well, I mean, I think creating the demand for the car with the tax credit was a good start. There is a $7,500 federal tax credit and a $4,500 state tax credit. That brings the cost of the car down to a Leaf, for example, from 34,000 or so to about 22,000 or so, which is actually cheaper than your average car. Because I think the average car, right now is more in the mid 20s, maybe a little bit higher than that. So so that brings the car down to a very affordable level.
It's actually cheaper than the average.
Yeah, so
conventional
that
car.
brings some interest in the cars. And as far as the vehicles themselves, the newer corporate average fuel economy standards are spurring the manufacturers to really look at hybrids and electric cars to make sure that their fleet's fuel economy is high enough. So there's some on the federal side, there's some incentives or disincentives, I guess, to get more fuel efficient cars. And with electric cars being the most fuel efficient. Again, I don't know exactly how they calculate miles per gallon electric car, but from what I understand, it those cars get a real high number. So it helps.
But you can make an apples and oranges kind of comparison for how much in dollars it costs to drive a certain number of miles. And you can compare it. I think you find electric cars are much cheaper, right? Much cheaper. So, under today's rates.
So those help. I mean, I've always wondered, on a personal level, how, with all these electric cars out there, is well, one, the disposal of the batteries once they're not usable.
You mean
anymore.
as dangerous waste? Environmentally hazardous waste.
There's going to be a lot of them, more of these electronic devices out there.
Question.
The other thing is the generation of electricity here. In Hawaii, you got all these solar panels and they're having PV farms or whatever. But I think for the foreseeable future, the vast majority of the electricity is still going to be produced by burning oil, and I don't know how efficient that is.
So, what's the difference between burning oil in the engine and burning oil somewhere else to power the engine with electricity? You're still burning oil.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good point.
at the end of the day, you may not be, doing that much benefit when you look at the bigger picture.
I think it all assumes that ultimately the utility or the source of power for these cars is going to come from something other than fossil fuel, whether it's biodiesel or wind or PV or something. And I mean, there's a fair chance that'll happen, although I certainly agree that it's not going to happen right away.
Yeah, because I think what won't happen is, everyone talks about conservation, but, with, as much conserving we think we're doing, we on average must use so much more electricity than we had in the past because there's so much more electronic devices out there.
Isn't that true?
Whether, before we used to be happy looking at tube TV that was 19 inches, and now people are looking at 60-inch plasmas,
Right. And it does take more power, yes.
Yeah, you got a cable box, a DVR, most homes have multiple computers, there might be as many computers, if not more, per household.
As cars. I'm kidding.
Yeah, as cars, yeah. So, so consumption as much, maybe each individual item might take a little less energy, but because we either have more of them or bigger ones.
Yeah.
I think we still got to look at the end of the day, look at how we actually generate the power, the juice to power all the toys we got.
If you take net metering, it's interesting how this sort of packages. If you take net metering and the concept of PV, efficient new PV cells, and you put them on your roof and you get that financed so it doesn't cost you anything up front, and get all these benefits to, and you have a lease situation, right? The guy who sat in that chair just before you was telling me about how they're doing this on Hampa Hanwanji. They're putting, lots of PV on top, but they're also leasing it to Hampa Hanwanji. I think it's really interesting. And I think that'll proliferate. But then, so now I have my residence, and I have my roof full of PV, and I'm powering all those computers and refrigerators and washer dryers and all that stuff, even the clothes washer, if you like, which takes a lot of power, okay, and my car. And I'm doing my car because my primary charge is at home, where I spent $2,000 or $3,000 installing this in my single-family home. So I'm kind of almost independent.
Okay. Yeah.
I have my little world of energy, and I create most of it myself, and I know where it comes from, and I may even sell a little bit, or at least I go neutral, right? I go on a wash with the utility company. That's a different world, and I mean it's almost like a perfect world, so perfect you can't believe it.
And again, there's a lot of questions there too, because I think with reverse metering, I think I'm sure HECO makes a lot of money, but basically you're with net metering, they're actually buying the electricity back from you at retail rates, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So that's one thing, and then I don't know that much about electricity and physics, but I don't know. I don't think the grid was made to handle electricity going in a different direction,
both
so to speak. Where I think the traditional model, you got a power plant and everything goes out, and there wasn't all these little plants, so to speak, right, with the homes and whatever. So I don't know how much of a problem that is. I'm not an engineer or scientist, so.
No, but and that raises a very interesting point, and I've heard this discussed by a lot of people in the industry, in the energy industry, and that is the notion of batteries. Okay, in order to deal with all this photovoltaic and wind, which wind is not quite firm, in other words, goes up and down,
Right.
and other renewables, you need a battery of some kind, and the bigger the battery, the better. And that's technology that's not yet been perfected or scalable. But there's talk about how you could draw upon and include in the grid the collective battery of hundreds of thousands of electric cars, all of whom are connected to the grid by these chargers. And it is two ways in that context. So now what happens is if the utility needs some extra power in order to keep things balanced, well, it just sucks a little energy out of all those cars in the middle of the night or whatever. And I mean, I know it sounds far-fetched, but people do talk about this, and some people think that this is the battery we've been waiting for. It's the collective community battery composed of hundreds of thousands of car batteries. That's weird, but no, I think there's a real chance that could happen. In other words, that kind of technology could be developed before we develop a real big battery for the utility to use as such. So there may be another purpose in all of this technology coming.
And another thing, with Hawaii too, from what I understand too, is like you don't have, each island maybe has a different power plant, whereas on the mainland, you got grids, so you got, if you're producing the power plant in, something happens to a power plant in LA or something, you can still somehow draw electricity from some power plant in Texas or something. You got these network of power plants and grids that are all interconnected, whereas Hawaii, each island, I think has an independent grid.
Yeah, sure.
So even more so to kind of keep a steady, I guess, current in the grid is a little bit of a challenge, especially like you said with sun's up, you produce energy, sun goes down, you produce nothing. Wind also depends on how it's blowing, I guess, how much wind there is and things like that. I mean, I suppose, maybe generation through like the current or something might be a little more stable. I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
Well, I went out to see the new, what they call a peaking plant in Kapolei. It's a brand new plant. It's only been online for a few months, or less actually, a couple of months I think. although it's been ready for a long time, it hasn't gone online because they couldn't find the biofuel.
Okay.
It runs on biofuel. It's 100 megawatts. It's big, and it's a peaking plant, which means that they only use it at certain times of the day when they're short, like when everybody goes home after work. That's a big peaking plant time. And in fact, we stood there and the thing was turned on. You know, wow, thank you. I wanted to see that because you couldn't tell. But what's interesting is that it runs on biofuel, and we have a supply in the form of the big tanks over there of biofuel that comes in by ship from actually the mainland. I want to say Iowa or Idaho in there, and I said to myself, gee, you know, you can take an ordinary diesel car, and you can run that on biofuel. Why don't we do that? Why do we need electric cars anyway? It all sounds so complicated. Are you selling diesel cars these days?
Yeah, we have diesel. Volkswagen is pretty big on diesel, but I think they require certain grade of a diesel fuel.
Mm-hmm.
So so you can't
You have to change the way it works.
Yeah.
Maybe tune them up, adapt them somehow.
Yeah. So you can't just start pouring biofuel in the car, and there's too many things I guess that ends up going wrong with the car if you do that. But you can take a certain mix, just like your regular gas powered cars. Some are E85 capable, while others, they can't have more than a certain percentage of
Like with the ethanol,
in the car. So I think same thing on.
But it hasn't really happened though. I mean, I'm not aware of any place where they're using on any scale basis, they're using biofuel to run, biodiesel to run diesel cars.
Yeah.
They use it to run a lot of other stuff, but not diesel cars. So we may hear that shoe drop over time.
Yeah. And also, I guess from some people like diesel, but I think diesel in the U.S., at least for cars, have a little bit of an image problem. People still imagine the noisy, clanky, smoky,
right,
car, which
right.
is not really the case. But the
case,
real problem here, though, is there's a significant gap between the price of regular unleaded and diesel, much more so than there's on the mainland. So if you're trying to pencil that on an economic level, the diesels are a little bit harder to justify.
Biodiesels.
Or diesels in general.
Diesel in general is more expensive per gallon. Yeah.
There's a bigger gap between regular unleaded and the diesel at the pump here, than there is on the mainland.
Yeah. So
to kind of pencil as far as overall, but the diesel cars generally get better gas mileage. So you kind of pencil that in, but then when you plug in the price of a gallon each of those kind of fuels. It's a little harder to.
It's interesting, and it may be that we didn't get satisfaction on the ethanol thing, so that we're not likely to go down the biodiesel trail.
Yeah.
And electric seems so much cleaner and more, more gadgety. But I wanted to ask you, going forward, we only have a few minutes left here. Going forward, what is Tony Group going to do? You have that wonderful book with you, Nissan Leaf Dealer Information Guide. So how does that guide you through, actually?
Well, this actually kind of tells you a lot about the overview of the car, what we need to be to certify, and training as far as selling, as well as the servicing of the vehicle, since it's so new for us. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a car, but because the way it's really the first time in many a century of cars that that anyone's planned to sell an all electric vehicle on a mass scale.
It is a big change.
Yeah. This year, I think the allotment of Leafs that are coming out of Japan is only like 25,000 cars, but Nissan is building a plant that is capable of building 150,000 electric cars a year, with 200,000 battery can be produced out of that plant.
So this means
they got big plans.
We won't have the worry of not being able to find the inventory. It'll be there. Is that what you're saying?
Eventually,
Mhm.
eventually. Like I said, the first year's allotment, they're all from Japan, and it's only 25,000. You know, but Nissan again expects big things, and they'll expand beyond the Leaf. I mean, we don't know what other models will be there besides the Leaf, but then I do know that one of the vehicles that they will come out is a commercial vehicle. So it's more like a delivery type
really?
vehicle
Oh.
that will be one of the follow-ups to the Leaf. And I'm sure depending on how successful the Leaf itself is, you know, they'll expand the line somehow.
And somehow, you know, we are at the intersection now.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
where
yeah.
we get to ask those questions. This is where we get to figure out what's next.
Yeah.
And we'd never been here before on the brink of 300 cars.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, so it'd be interesting. It'd be interesting 300 cars, and yeah, like you said, I'm kind of very interested in how the car performs. 'Cause I think it'll generate a lot of buzz. You know, I was talking to somebody about, you know, it's one thing about having a Nissan GTR and you know, and people are waiting for decades for this car to show up because it used to only be available in Japan. But it only interests a certain segment of the population. You know, whereas this electric car, you know, I don't think not everyone will buy this thing, but I think everybody have some interest in it. You know, so even people who have no intention of buying an electric car, you know, I think they'll people will ask, oh, how do you like this car? What is it? You know, but it takes a while for the public to you know, the average, you know, member of the public to know that, because sometimes you talk to people and people still think that you got to plug in a hybrid, and hybrids have been around for a while,
Yeah.
so yeah.
They don't know.
Yeah.
And you know, they're not gonna know until they hear it a lot over and
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
from guys like you, and also they get to sit down in one of them,
Yeah.
you know, and see how it works, feel that silence,
Right.
whatever it is.
Right.
Well, thanks again, Stan.
Thanks.
This is a great discussion. Aloha.
All right, it's warm in here.
Oh, the AC.
The air went off.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, the AC went off.
This, you know, late in the afternoon, you always have that risk.
Is there a red light up there? Or is it a reflection off something else?
No, it's a fire thing.
Oh. Yeah, let me open the door. It's getting warm, but I'm trying to open it.
Okay.
Cool outside.
Just close everything off. Take the tape. Oops.
Can we step on this, Jay?
Hmm?
Can I step on this?
Yeah, just step on that. Get out of here.